They say weddings are for the couple, but that's a lie. Weddings are for the guests, for their opinions, for their glances, for their whispers when they think no one hears. I didn't feel married when I said I do. I felt married when his sister leaned toward her mother and hissed, "She's just here to fill a seat." I felt it like a pin pushed under my skin. Quick, quiet, deep, enough to bruise. The ceremony was small, not by choice. His family preferred intimate gatherings, which really meant exclusive. I wasn't part of that circle. I was the guest of my own wedding, the tolerated accessory, the outsider who was too polite, too composed, too quiet. His sister wore white, not cream, not champagne, white dot, and no one said a word, not even him. Especially not him. I heard the whisper before the vows. Just before I turned to face him, she leaned in from the third row. Her voice was delicate, deliberate. "She's just here to fill a seat." And then she smiled at me like it was nothing, like I hadn't just heard my entire place in their world condensed into furniture. I turned back to him. He looked nervous. Not about the marriage, about the audience. He wanted them to like me. He always wanted that more than I did. He thought I didn't notice when he adjusted my tone at dinners, when he softened my edges in front of them, when he skipped details in our stories to keep the narrative clean. He didn't want a wife. He wanted approval, and I had given it to him quietly. For far too long, the vows were forgettable. His were polished. He used the word forever like a tagline, said I was his safe place, his constant. I smiled through all of it because that's what I was taught to do. Smile through the discomfort, smile through the small slights, smile through being erased in slow motion when it was my turn to speak. I hesitated, not because I forgot my vows. I never wrote them. I didn't need to. I'd already made so many promises he didn't know about. I had promised to dim my opinions, to nod instead of push back, to wear the dress his mother approved of, to let his sister call me sweet instead of smart. I had signed a prenup I didn't read in front of a lawyer who never met my eyes. Just a formality. "They said it protects you too," he said. But I knew better. I spoke 3 lines, short, elegant, perfectly forgettable. I kissed him. The guests clapped. The officiant smiled, and somewhere in the third row, a woman in white leaned back in her chair, victorious. The reception was just a hallway and some candles. His family loved minimalism. Or maybe they just hated warmth. The music was classical, the champagne lukewarm, the toasts short. I stood beside him like an exhibit, silent, framed, smiling. No one asked me how I felt. No one asked what I gave up. No one asked who I was before I became his wife. His sister approached. Near the end, still smiling, she touched my arm lightly and said, "You did well. You looked so... contained." I don't remember what I said back. Maybe nothing. Maybe a thank you wrapped in glass. But I do remember what I felt. Like I had been dressed for a funeral. I wasn't allowed to grieve. Back in the bridal suite, I opened the drawer where I kept my bag. The prenup was inside, still folded, still untouched, still mine. I held it in my hands and thought, if I'm just a seat, then let me be the last one standing. The wedding didn't break me. It just revealed the cracks I'd been covering with smiles and soft lipstick. The real story began months earlier, when I stopped recognizing my voice in rooms we shared, when I realized I'd learned to measure my sentences by how often his mother blinked, when I understood that approval in his world was currency, and I was always a few cents short. He never told me to change, not in words, but he never stopped me. When I did, the first time we visited his parents, I brought wine. His sister answered the door, looked at the bottle, looked at me. "Oh, we're more of a European cellar kind of family." She didn't take it, just turned and walked away. He laughed and said, "They're picky. Don't take it personally." So I did single quotes T. instead. I Googled wine regions before every future visit. I learned to pronounce things I never cared about, not because I wanted to, but because I didn't want to embarrass him again. He never said I was embarrassing, but he never defended me either. At dinners, I stopped talking about work. He said it made his father uncomfortable. He's traditional. It's not you, it's generational. So I stopped. I let his mother speak over me, let his sister interrupt, smiled through the stories I wasn't in, watched as they referred to me as polite, like it was both a compliment and a warning. He said I made things easier by not reacting. I called that peace, but it was really invisibility. The engagement happened at a vineyard cliché, perfect Instagram-friendly. His mother cried. His sister clapped. No one asked what I thought of the ring, and I didn't offer because the moment wasn't for me. It was for them to prove that I was exactly what they wanted. A quiet yes to complete their table. He handed me the in a manila folder a week later, said it was standard, said it made things clean. I asked if he wanted to go over it together. He kissed my cheek and said, "I trust you." But I knew what he meant. He meant, "You trust me, so you'll sign it." I did. Without a lawyer, without a question. Not because I didn't care about the money, but because I didn't want to give them another reason to think I was after it. He thanked me, like I had handed him a cup of tea. No emotion, no hesitation. Just convenience. I asked if his sister had a prenup too. He blinked. That's different. I had whittled myself into a version they could tolerate. I wore the dress they liked, chose the flowers, she suggested. Let go of the idea of writing my own vows because his sister said, traditional is more elegant. I told myself it didn't matter, that love was compromise, that once we were married, things would settle, but I was already settled, deep into a silence I hadn't chosen, a silence I had fed with all the parts of myself I thought were too loud, too bold, too much. The day before the wedding, I looked at myself in the mirror and whispered, "This isn't me." And then I smiled anyway because I'd trained my mouth to obey. Weddings are built on words, but mine was built on silence. I never said what I meant, never said what I wanted, never said what I feared. I stood there in that dress, that perfect, stiff dress, and mouthed the same script every bride is fed, smiled, nodded, accepted. But inside, another version of me was whispering, "This isn't a beginning. This is a performance." As the reception wore on, I watched them laugh. His sister with her tilted glass, her white dress now slightly stained with champagne. His mother holding court at the table, retelling the proposal like she had lived it herself, and him floating between conversations. Basking in their approval, he looked so happy, but not because we were married, because I had fit, because I had stayed small. I reached into my clutch and touched the folded paper. The prenup had carried it with me all day, not as a threat, as a reminder. A symbol of how much I had been willing to give and how little was ever truly mine. I hadn't decided when I would give it to her. I didn't want to ruin anything. That's what I kept telling myself, don't ruin it. As if I was the one who had whispered poison before vows. As if I was the intruder. But then she approached me again, his sister, same smug tilt to her head, same look that said she had memorized all my limits. She leaned in and whispered, "I have to admit, I didn't think you'd go through with it." My heart didn't race. It slowed. Everything in me went quiet, not from rage, from certainty. I reached into my clutch, pulled out the paper, unfolded it carefully, like a love letter, held it between two fingers, clean, precise, weightless. I looked her in the eyes and said simply, "This is what I signed." For nothing. She blinked. For the first time all day. Her smile faltered. "What?" I handed it to her, not with spite, with elegance. "Since I'm just here to fill a seat, you might as well know what that seat costs." She stared at the document like it was something alive. Her mouth opened, then shut. The music played on behind us. Someone laughed across the room. No. One noticed the moment a woman stopped being decor and became a mirror. I walked away, left her standing there. Alone with the paper she helped make necessary. I passed my husband, my new husband, and didn't stop. He touched my arm. Light as a question. "Everything okay?" I smiled. "Perfect." And it was because for the first time that day, I had said something real. The wedding ended, but the performance continued. We returned from the brief honeymoon, a trip so curated it felt like a travel ad more than a memory, and stepped back into a life. Already arranged, his life, not ours. The apartment wasn't mine. I lived there. Yes, my clothes in drawers, my books on shelves, but I'd never picked the curtains, never chose the plates, never touched the art on the walls. Every object had a story that didn't include me, and no one wanted to rewrite them. His sister sent a message 3 days after we returned. A picture of us at the altar, no caption, just the image. I stared at it, longer than I should have. Not at him. At me. My smile looked soft, but it wasn't single quotes it was trained. The kind of smile you wear at family dinners when you've just been insulted. But the food hasn't arrived yet. We had dinner with his parents. The following week. His mother kissed my cheek like I was made of glass. His father raised a toast to family values. His sister didn't speak directly to me, but when dessert came, she leaned in and said, "I hope you kept a copy." I didn't respond, didn't need to. The silence between us was enough. Later, that night, he asked why I was so cold. "You've been different since the wedding," he said. "Is something wrong?" I almost laughed, not because it was funny, because it was tragic. He was asking now, after the papers, after the whisper, after the choice to let me drown in subtle cruelty. I told him I was tired. He said, "Well, marriage is work. You knew that." I nodded. But what I didn't say was, I've already done the work. I've been doing it since before you asked me to marry you alone. In bed, he turned his back to me like always, and I stared at the ceiling, tracing the corners of the room with my eyes, wondering how a space can feel so unfamiliar. When you sleep in it every night, I started noticing the little things more sharply. The way his mother interrupted me when I spoke. The way his sister rolled her eyes when I offered an opinion. The way he laughed just a little too quickly when they made jokes at my expense. I'd been shrinking for so long that I didn't realize how much smaller I had become until now. I wasn't angry yet. That would come later. What I felt now was clarity, a slow, precise unfolding of all the moments I had let slide. Because love isn't supposed to make you small, and yet here I was, a name on a mailbox, a hand on his arm, a body in the family photo, but never a presence, just a placeholder. The seat I filled at the wedding. I no longer fit in it, not because I changed, but because I finally realized I was never meant to stay. They thought I wouldn't read it. They thought I'd sign and smile, because women like me don't challenge things. We accept, we decorate, we soften. But I did read it, not right away, not when he handed it to me before. The wedding with that practiced voice, it's just standard, babe, nothing scary. I smiled then, folded it neatly, tucked it into my bag, but I never threw it away. 1 week after the reception, I sat alone at our kitchen table, lights off, just the oven light glowing faintly, casting long shadows. I unfolded the prenup slowly, not as a legal document, but as a confession, and I read every clause, every condition, every assumption they made about what I deserved and didn't. It wasn't cruel, just calculated. It gave me nothing, guaranteed no support. Made it clear that I was a guest in his future. I could stay, smile, host the dinners, manage the calendar, support his ambitions. But if I left, I'd walk away with less than I came in with. They didn't want a wife, they wanted a ghost in pearls. I marked the clauses in red ink, highlighted the phrases that said zero compensation, circled the term waiver of claim. It read less like a promise of love and more like an eviction notice from their world. The next morning, I made a copy, kept it in a folder with my name printed in bold on the cover. That was the first time. In months, I wrote my name without his beside it. It felt like stitching something back into place later that week. His sister called not to check in, to invite us to a family dinner. We're celebrating the new expansion. You'll love the house. Very modern. I said we'd think about it. She laughed. Well, you're part of the family now. No backing out. Her words clanged in my ear like a cage locking. I opened the folder that night and read the contract. Again, that's time not as something I had signed, but as something I had survived. Tuesday, I started making notes what they owed me emotionally, what I gave up, what I learned. It became less about law and more about clarity. They had thought the prenup was the ending of negotiation. They didn't know it would be the beginning of mine. I met with a lawyer 2 days later, not to fight, to understand. She read it in silence, then looked up and said, "This isn't protection. This is power imbalance on paper." I nodded. "Can I do something with it?" She smiled, cold and brilliant. "Absolutely. But the question is, do you want to leave quietly or rewrite the story before you go?" I didn't answer her then, but I already knew I wasn't going to run. Not yet. They wanted me silent. Then, they'd hear every page turn before I left. The next family dinner was held at his sister's new house. Of course, a celebration of growth, power, and presentation. Marble countertops, art she couldn't pronounce. Staff that stood just out of view, everything designed to whisper, "We are untouchable." I wore the same dress from our engagement party. She noticed, "Oh, vintage already." I smiled. Some things age better than others. We sat at a long table, white linen, polished silver. Laughter like a rehearsal. They toasted to legacy, to expansion, 2 strong bloodlines. No one said love. No one asked how I was. Just as before, I waited until the final course, the room warm with wine and obligation. Then I stood, calm, steady. No need for theatrics before dessert. I said, "I have a small gift for the family." Heads turned, smiles tightened. Even he looked confused. I reached into my bag and pulled out an envelope, identical to the one I carried on my wedding day. I placed it at the center of the table neatly, directly beside the silver centerpiece. "Of artificial flowers, this," I said, "is the prenup I signed. For nothing." His sister's face froze first. Then his mother's glass paused. Mid-air. He blinked once, twice. No one spoke. No one laughed. Only the sound of forks being quietly lowered. I continued. "I signed it without reading it because I trusted you, because I thought that would mean something." I looked at him, not with accusation, but with freedom. It meant nothing. So now, neither does this. I opened the envelope, removed the document, and slowly, carefully, tore it in half. then again and again until it was just paper, just nothing. I set the pieces down and stepped back. I brought my own seat to this table, but I've realized I don't want it anymore. And I walked out. He didn't follow, not right away. And when he did, it wasn't to fight, it was to whisper. You don't have to do this. I turned to him. I already did. The next morning, I packed not just my things, but the idea of myself that had lived in their world. The version that smiled too wide, that dressed too safe, that measured her value in proximity to their name. I left the key on the counter, left the ring on the nightstand, left the chair they gave me empty, because some seats aren't worth filling, not if you have to disappear to fit in them, and some stories don't end in applause, they end in the quiet satisfaction of walking away whole.